What is happening, y'all? Cowboy here, and welcome to my ultimate lance guide. Now, the lance is the defensive bastion of Monster Hunter, and I think a lot of people sleep on lance. They think of lance as like, oh, you know, with the lance, you're just pokes, you're not doing much, and it's actually gotten a fair amount more dynamic with what we have in Wilds, because you are just constantly attacking out of pretty much anything. You're going to be just doing big, beefy follow-ups. You know, we can just constantly counterattack, and that's what makes this weapon so strong, is there really is no downtime to lance. You're just going and going and going, and that's actually what makes this such a fun weapon, is, you know, where something like the dual blades, we're evading through everything, or with the bow, we're evading through everything. With the lance, you are blocking the entire world. So either way, we're going to be covering the changes that were brought to lance in Wilds. We're going to be going through, taking a look at various lances I would recommend, various armor sets, and doing a hunt, obvious spoilers, and let's jump in. Now, jumping into the weapon controls, covering some of the stuff that is new here. There's not a whole lot, but one of the big things is charge counter. Previously, this used to just be like a quick counterattack, and now this is a released counterattack. And the idea is we're holding this guard up, and then if we release it, right as an attack would connect, we get a double counter thrust, which is incredibly strong. Power Guard has also been reworked. It's actually useful now. In addition to being a 306-degree block that can stop anything, it gives us access to Grand Retribution, one of our strongest counterattacks, and it's just a decent move now, as opposed to before where you just never used it at all. A dash attack is still the same. Return thrust, you're never going to use that. Just don't bother. Payback thrust is actually pretty useful, but there's something even better, which we'll talk about in a second. Now, all of our basic combos can chain into either a triple thrust or a charge counter, depending on whether you finish with Y or B. We'll talk about those in just a second. And our main counters after guard are return thrust, payback thrust, and retribution thrust. Retribution thrust is typically the strongest, but it also has the highest animation commitment. So in general, if you need a quick attack, payback thrust comes out. If you have the time to commit, retribution thrust comes out. Now, talking about some of the basics, first up, Y is going to be mid thrusts. We're never going to do mid thrusts. There's literally no reason to do mid thrusts because they are strictly worse than a high thrust. So what I mean is like that 54 damage. Doing a high thrust, 82, well, that was a crit, but doing a high thrust, 66 damage. So the point being, you always want to be high thrusting. Now, wide sweep is also very strong, but it does have higher animation commitment. So for example, if I'm just high thrusting into triple thrust, you can see I'm keeping this up pretty decent pace. If I'm working wide slash in, it's going to slow things down a little bit, but the thing is, wide slash is one of our highest motion value moves, so that's coming in at 200 damage, whereas that typical third attack is hitting 105 on crit. So in general, it's roughly double the damage that the third high thrust would get. And to be completely honest, I haven't done like an extended, 1 minute cycle of timing this out, but I would guess more than likely that the wide sweep is going to pull ahead. Now, in general, we are going to end things off with the triple thrust, which is finishing with Y, just because that's going to be 3 attacks. If instead you decide to press B and go into the charge counter, keep in mind you want to release this and time it with an attack. You can see there I did 166. If I release it at the same time an attack hits, you'll notice I got 2 attacks in at the end there, and that's the double counter thrust. That's what we're really looking for. Now, besides that, some other things. Stationary, YB will do leaping thrust, but if you're trying to get to a leaping thrust, I would usually do a guard dash into leaping thrust. So forward and Y and then hit B, just because we're covering even more distance with that. Guard thrust with a Y is going to be a little shield bash. You can get KO on that. If you're really trying to move, that's where our dash attack comes in. While you're holding guard, you're just pressing Y and B. And this used to be like the go-to for chasing monsters, but now we have our secret. It's still a fantastic option to mount the target, because while we can press, well, let me get off this slope. That messed me up a little bit. When we are doing this, if we pick a direction in A, we have the dash steps. But if we hold A and forward, we have the advancing jump thrust. And that will do mount damage very similar to how the sword and shield does when it jumps up in the air, which makes it pretty solid. Now, I'm still a big fan of using this when the monster is down. It does gobble up sharpness, but if a monster isn't moving, you can see this ramps up very quickly, and it's going to chew through stamina. But I mean, this is some pretty decent damage for just literally like sitting and letting it go, And especially if you have a lance that's doing elemental or status, you can see we got a blast proc in there. And I mean, to be honest, it's really fun just being the choo-choo train of death. So I don't know if that's optimal, but I'm going to be honest, I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway because it's fun. Now, talking about our guard play. Out of any guard attack, we have 3 real options. The first is return thrust, which we never want to do. And see, we got 166 with our block there. The second is going to be payback, which got us up to 216. And the third is going to be retribution, which typically goes a little bit harder. I don't think I got the perfect guard window on it. Yeah, there we go. That's what a retribution thrust should look like. Now, retribution thrust is going to be our ideal choice if we have the time to get to it. If we don't, we want to go for a payback thrust instead. So either Y and B or B. Those are going to be your 2 main options. Now, as we can also go straight into our charge counter, and this charge counter actually has levels to the charge. And you'll notice if you whiff the charge counter, you're just going to get a regular guard attack. Just a straight poke, nothing special. But if you time it right, you're getting a big, beefy double counter thrust. And typically, we're not going to just sit and be like, here it comes, because, you know, just being like, I'm going to get this monster. Come on, attack me. And just holding that for a long time, I probably could have just attacked the monster and gotten in damage and the time that I would have been waiting to do that. But regardless, I wanted to talk about it. Now, talking about our power guard options, I really like working power guard in when I have a very strong attack coming. And when I say very strong attack, I mean something that typically you can't guard against. So obviously you're going to want to have guard up to do this. But the idea in doing a power guard and a follow-up is we can get some very potent attacks. So first up, leaping thrust. Now that was a double crit, so it did 140 on each. The payback. Not really the option here. And lastly, if we take a really big hit, Grand Retribution, which is going to be our strongest available counterattack. Now, one thing to keep in mind is when we're in Power Guard, you'll notice our stamina is rapidly draining. And eventually it's going to run out and we're not going to be able to block. But the thing is, it doesn't matter how long we're in Power Guard, and we can hold our charge counter forever. So while we're holding the charge counter, we see the attack's about to come, Power Guard, block it, boom, 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 with the Grand Retribution. And once again, we're only going to really do that if there is a big attack coming, because otherwise the damage on it is really not going to be worth it. And if it's something that is a more simple attack, to be honest, at that point, we would have been better off just guarding and then going into a Grand Thrust or something else. Now, another reason we never do Return Thrust is anytime we get a... Let me put this guy back on normal attacks just for the cadence of them. Anytime we get a perfect guard, we can transition straight into the 3rd level ability that we have. So we could do Retribution. Didn't mean to do that. Hang on. We can do either a Retribution or a Payback, and from there we could go straight into a triple thrust. So, boom, and then hit Y. And so anytime you get the perfect guard, regardless of if you go Retribution or the other one, we can always go into a triple thrust. Now, Return Thrust, you'll notice that that's just like it starts our combo, and so that's why we really don't want to do Return Thrust, because anything else we do, we're getting a free triple thrust. So I know there's been a lot of counters, but to kind of break it down and sum it up, in general, anytime you get a perfect guard, if you have a big enough window, Retribution into triple. If you have a smaller window, Payback into triple. For our level 3s, we're just going to B, weep, triple. If a big attack is going to be coming instead, and you're like, oh, I'm not going to really have time, then we could go into the charge. And just let and sit. But keep in mind, notice, we're not getting charge levels for this. Even though that is charge and it can get the double hit, it doesn't have the charge levels that we have with the normal charge counter. As for Power Guard, always use Power Guard at the last possible minute, because this costs no stamina. We can go into Power Guard, and out of Power Guard, Grand Retribution is usually going to be our biggest damage option. But once again, we're only really looking to use that when a big hit is coming in. So with all that being covered, let's hop over to town and take a look at some lances. Now, jumping in and taking a couple looks at lances here over at Gemma. To start early on, more than likely you're just going to be working with an expedition, but some of the early ones which are pretty respectable. The first is probably going to be the Bone, coming in at 130 raw, healthy amount of yellow sharpness on that, and a singular point of attack boost and guard. But then once you get it, the Doshaguma, despite punishing draw being complete cheeks, 140 on raw is pretty substantial, and this is more than likely going to be what carries you all the way through to the end of the game. Let me get that off the screen. Now, once we get to end game lances, there's actually quite a few options. Now, I am running Ardian. This is less than ideal for an Ardian. It has sharpness, sharpness, attack, element, element. Ideally, I would probably want 1 sharpness, 4 attack on it. That would be like my best in slot Ardian. And if I had 4 attackness and 1 sharp on it, it would probably be the best in slot lance in the game, but I'm still working on re-rolling this. But there are quite a few lances that are very solid and quite a few that are actually better than what I have right now. For starters, just in terms of a 1-to-1 comparison, my lance is basically equal to what we're getting in EFR out of the Guardian Purifying View mains. Coming in at 240 minus 10 with blue, it does have 2 points of guard, which is pretty nice. The Guardian Doshaguma is pretty staggering, and this is honestly probably one of the best lances available. We have 250 raw attack, blue sharpness, which is less than ideal, but still okay, minus 15 affinity, but we have offensive guard already baked into it, which is a core necessary lance skill, and that's huge because we don't want any wasted decoration slots. Some others that are pretty comparable to that, the Gravios is also nice, but to be honest, 3 points of guard up is kind of wasted. Even then, it's also 250 minus 15, but it comes with 350 blast. So we're getting a near identical setup to the Gloomborer, but we're picking up 350 blast, but we are losing offensive guard. Now, despite those, there are actually 2 that are even stronger, and they're probably not going to be what you would expect. Going all the way up, one of the strongest lances available to us in the game. Not that guy. Where did it go? Where did it go? How am I not seeing it? There's this stupid thing. There it is. The Fire Trail Commonet, coming in at 240 for some reason, with positive affinity and 3 points of guard and 5% affinity and 200 fire. It doesn't make sense. This thing should not have the stats that it does, but regardless, this comes in and it pumps some serious damage. And despite that, there's even one stronger than this, and that is all the way up here. The Guardian Rathalos Lance, coming in at 220, 15% affinity, 250 fire, and white sharpness. Now, these lances are winning on pure EFR, but an important thing to keep in mind is lance absolutely chews through sharpness. And even though this one's better, to be honest, there's absolutely no way I would take a lance that has crit element and master's touch over guard. I'd much rather have guard 3. But look at how much sharpness I have compared to how much Shining Pillar has. Now, given I do have 2 sharpness rolls on this, just having 1 sharpness would give me better white than pretty much anything except for like an Indra Claire Lance. And so that's a big thing to keep in mind. If you can make a solid Ardian Blast Lance is probably going to be the way to go. Until you get the materials ready to slap one of those together, Chemitrice is... It's honestly, I don't know why this is as strong as it is, but 240 with positive affinity and 200 fire and guard is kind of nutty. I would consider this to probably be the best until you get a best in slot Ardian. In terms of raw EFR, this comes in at like 292, and while the Wrath comes in at 301, keep in mind the Wrath has significantly less sharpness on it, and as soon as the Wrath drops into blue, which will be pretty quick, it would drop down to 274. So yeah, probably not use the Rathian. I would say use this bad boy until you can forge an Ardian. Now, in terms of element, it's going to be a bit of a toss-up. A triple element Ardian Lance is going to have 300 base element, and we have quite a few. This one's at 350 fire. Quite a few are up there. It's going to win in some categories, but we have the 350 dragon, and then we have the 320 dragon, and then we have the 350 fire. But keep in mind, we have 3 level 3 decoration slots with Ardian. So, as always, I do think Ardian is going to be the clear winner when it comes to element, because with the 3 level 3s, we could go for something like Razor Sharp Iron Wall, like I have right there. We could put in an element, and then we could do like some guard up and or offensive guard, basically. And that is going to be a lot more valuable to me than a little bit of raw stats, just because offensive guard is so powerful with how frequently we're going to be blocking. Now, hopping on over and taking a look at the armor, like many weapons, pretty much everything that comes on Lance that we need, all of our skills, you know, our offensive guard, our guard up, all of that stuff is going to be on the weapon itself. So with that in mind, what do we benefit from? You guessed it, like every other build, a vein extender is going to be very nice to have early on. Now, once we get into high rank, honestly, you're just going to be working up towards damage sets, and there's not a whole lot that we would focus on early on. If you want to go for Constitution for better block, you could, but honestly, that's going to be completely pointless. You're not going to need to worry about it. I honestly wouldn't worry about an early set at all. If anything, and you're like, you know, I don't care, I need to craft something, honestly, just get up to where a Guardian Ebony Garen is, because burst is just going to be a solid skill, and we're constantly attacking, so it's not going to be hard to maintain burst. I'd probably go for that, because to be honest, Lance is going to be blocking everything, and especially once shield or once you start getting your guard decos, you know, it doesn't matter anymore. There are a very limited number of unblockable attacks currently in the game, so guard up isn't as much of a priority, and once you get a Lance that has offensive guard and guard on it, you're just going to be pumping. Now, with that being said, let's hop over and take a look at my particular build. Now, first up, Razor Sharp. This is absolutely needed. I don't know what they did, but the Lance gobbles through sharpness. I mean, at an insane rate. So I would not run a Lance without Razor Sharp. This particular Lance, I might be able to, but this also has double sharpness boost, which typically I would not have double sharpness boost. This is the equivalent of having like Handicraft 6 on a weapon. Shield Iron Wall, ideally I'd much rather have like Iron Wall Shield. I don't know if that exists yet, so instead I have Razor Sharp Iron Wall and then Shield Iron Wall, giving me 2 points of guard and guard up, which is less than ideal. I don't need 3 guard up, but for whatever reason, man, the game it's being very stingy with guard. You know, if I go over to my guard, you can see I have Iron Wall and I have a lot of like Blaze Iron Wall and crit status Iron Wall, but the game just, I mean, a magazine Iron Wall, it does not want to give me a level 3 Iron Wall. But Shield Iron Wall is fine. I'll take max guard up and then a singular point of guard. And then of course, Guardian Jewel. Guardian Jewels are going to be your best friend with Lance because we are constantly blocking. Now these tend to roll comboed with elements, which would be nice if you're doing an element Lance, not just slap a single one on there and call it a day. Now, as for the armor set, we are running Gore Beta Helm, Gore Beta Greaves, the Guardian Arcveld Vambraces, the Arc Vulcan Coil, and in the chest we actually have a little bit of flex here. We can go with Guardian Arcveld Mail, and that's going to get us the 2-piece set bonus for Decimator, or alternatively, you could go for Arcveld's Hunger, and that'll get you the 2-piece set bonus for Haste of Recovery. Now, the main difference between these two pieces, they're going to be identical because one comes with Wex, one comes with Flare, and whichever skill we don't get, we're just going to drop a deco in. So they are 1-to-1. The trade-off is in one setup, we're going to be picking up Blight Resistance, and in the other setup, we're going to pick up a level 2 Decoration. So go for whichever you want. Keep in mind, this piece is also going to decide our set bonus skill. Personally, I think Guardian Arcveld's Vitality is better than Arcveld's Hunger, but given that it's kind of a pain in the ass to get wounds every now and again when you're playing as Lance, Arcveld's Hunger might be a safer bet. But like I said, I mean, we're pinching pennies at this point. It's going to be fine either way. But so this particular set, slap the decos in, and what do we end up with? We have Wex 5, we have Flayer 5, we have Divine Blessing 3, we have Recovery Up 3, we have Antivirus along with the 2-piece Gore, which is going to give us a fat little chunk of affinity. Of course, we're picking up the 2 points of Blight Resist, a little bit of evade window coming in from the set, some flinch free and coalescence, and this is a stacked Lance set. This just pumps out damage in the best way possible. So either way, that is going to cover it for the build. Up next, we are going to be hunting a big boy, so give me just a second to find him, and we'll get to it. Now, I really hope this doesn't crash. Earlier, I had lots of crashes over in this area. The recent patch, I don't know what's going on. Fingers crossed that Wounded Hollow is not going to crash, and it was something with Gore in particular. Either way, let's get to it. We got an Arcveld in the arena. Sunday, Sunday, Sunday. Already whiffing my blocks. Let's go. Pro Lance gameplay right here, ladies and gentlemen. Now listen, I'm just getting warmed up, bro. You gotta stop that. Let me go ahead and put on my corruption mantle. Get him with the power clash. Give me that wound. Oh, the tail. I was really hoping to get the mega block on that, but it did not work out, unfortunately. Turn it around! Ha-ha! I've mounted you! Who said Lance isn't a fun weapon? Fucking doing a rodeo with this dude. I've been wanting to fight him for a while with these videos, but I mean, he has so many counter opportunities. I was like, I gotta do Lance. Oh, that's one thing I didn't cover. Out of that run, we can press backwards and Y for the finishing, the like turn thrust, which you saw me do there. And I know I'm doing mid thrust. I know I shouldn't. The second power clash. You cannot escape me, Arkveld. The tail always gets me, man. Oh, did not mean to jump there. Oh shit, he's doing his big one. Ooh. Nope. Oh, let that up a wee bit too early there. Damn. If I had just blocked that properly, I could have gotten the free knockdown on his chains. We're almost at 10 minutes. Oh, that was dumb. Ten minutes of pure lancing. And I'm just now getting into the blue sharpness. Hoping to get that wound. I didn't make it in time. This is probably a big waste of time. Let's get it into white real fast. Where'd he go? Where'd he go? Where'd he go? Oh my god, he stabbed me in my ass! He's not looking at me. Nope. Oh, goddamn, every time, bro. I can counter every attack he does, but that tail is always going to get me. Down Arkfeld goes. And that is the beauty of Lance. I mean, things got a little sketchy for 1 second there. You know, I had to go in and just call my dude in, get a heal. Reopened up with the stealth. But at the end of the day, man, like I said, bastion of defense. You just block and counter and block and counter. And to be honest, I mean, there was plenty of sloppy lance playing. I was accidentally working in some mid thrusts when I should have been. I was trying to get the triple thrust, and I was accidentally doing a mid thrust, and I wasn't countering as well as I should. And you know, I'm just better at explaining stuff. Those who can't do teach, or something like that, right? Either way, we have one more weapon to cover, so stay tuned, and I will catch y'all soon with our final weapon, the heavy bowgun.